I've just come back from France, where Mr. Sarkozy hopes to be the next president, certainly to be his candidate, his party's candidate. He's now talking about taking France out of Schengen. The Swedish Democrats, and don't be confused by the name, they're actually a hard-right nativist party, they are now polling #1 in Sweden, which of course Sweden per capita has taken more Syrian refugees than any other country in Europe. Is there a change because of this migrant crisis?
You know, I think Schengen has turned out to be a bit like the euro. It was a fair weather scheme. It was fine when the sun was shining, but neither has weathered its first proper crisis. Just as the debt crisis showed the weakness of the single currency, so the migration has shown the weakness of a border-free zone, which incentivizes the authorities of every country to wave people through so that they become somebody else's responsibility. So ultimately, nobody was in charge. I think there is something fundamentally wrong with what Jean-Claude Juncker was proposing in the speech that you had there. He wants to relocate people who have already come to the EU. And I think that is both inefficient and immoral. Immoral because those are not the people in the most need. There are 4 million people on the borders of Syria in wretched conditions. I was volunteering in a camp on the Turkish border last year. Those are, without question, refugees in fear of their lives. And Britain is right to be taking some of those people. But frankly, if you're in Italy or Hungary or Greece, you are not at immediate need of asylum. And among all of those population movements, inevitably, you have economic migrants jumbled in with genuine refugees. So it is absolutely the wrong priority.
All right, well, hold these thoughts because it's such a big issue. We're going to stick with it. It's become the dominant issue, not just in Britain, but across Europe. And this week, European leaders, they've been struggling to agree a coordinated plan to tackle the migrants' crisis. On Wednesday, the president of the EU Commission, that's Mr. Juncker, he proposed mandatory quotas for resettling asylum seekers or refugees across member states. But as Giles reports from Strasbourg, many countries are opposed to the plan.
It is a tragic fact, after 5 years of tragic facts surrounding the Syrian war, that a photograph of a dead child on a beach focuses minds on a problem. None more than the President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, who came to the European Parliament this week with a stark message. 160,000 refugees already in the EU must, note the must, be redistributed around the EU member states.
That's the number Europeans have to take in charge and have to take in their arms. And I really hope that this time everyone will be on board. No poems, no rhetorics. Action is what is needed for the time being.
Inside the chamber, Jean-Claude Juncker's plan is getting widespread approval and applause. There are more in there in favour than are not. But for it to work, he's going to need heads of government and their populations to be in favour. And right now, significant numbers of them are just not in favour enough. Is your position as President of the Commission, possibly backed by votes from the European Parliament, that those ordinary Europeans who have a different view of that kind of Europe must take these refugees because you say they must?
I'm not saying that because I'm saying it. These refugees and asylum seekers have to be taken in by those who don't want. I'm perfectly aware about the fact that there is a rather large part of the public opinion in all the countries, not always reflected in opinion polls, who don't want to do this, but it has to be done.
In France, with a government willing to help, Marine Le Pen's National Front loudly disagree. Denmark will not take part. Post-communist Eastern European member states are wary, and Hungary's governing party is clear.
Well, the view in Hungary, of course, is overwhelmingly very different from Mr. Juncker's. The general sense is that it's very nice if the Germans want to live in a multicultural society, that's their business. We don't. We're not wonderfully happy being Hungarian, but we've got to sort ourselves out, if you like, before we take on all sorts of people whom we don't know, can't understand, think differently, do things differently. Well, you can dismiss that, But the more you dismiss it, the more it comes back to bite you in a fairly sensitive part of your behind.
The UK is not included in Mr Juncker's plan, but in the European Parliament and countries who've already taken large numbers, like Germany, there's a feeling some member states aren't pulling their weight.
The member states really are the problem here. The European Commission has proposed bold steps. Sure, from my point of view, they don't go far enough. We don't yet have a complete reform proposal for the whole Dublin system, only emergency measures, but still we are in an emergency state, so we have to do something about it. So the Commission is not the problem. The problem is really governments, a couple, like not so few of them, who are saying they don't want to take refugees.
The Greens have seriously suggested handing the Parliament building over to house refugees. It does stand heated, lit and empty 300 days of the year. But as the Commission are finding, having the space doesn't mean everyone wants it filled.
That was our Giles reporting. We're joined now by the UKIP MEP, Patrick O'Flynn. Welcome back to the programme. Let me come to you, Dan Hannan, first. The President of the Commission is talking about 160,000 refugees, asylum seekers, migrants, whatever you'd like to call them. They are already in Hungary, Italy and Greece. I know of no way how you could send them back or where you would send them back to. Surely if Europe means anything, you have to divide that 160,000 in some equitable way among the member states.
Well, first of all, you can't have a quota system and free movement of people. You have one or the other, but there's no way you can say to someone, you stay in Bulgaria because you're part of their quota, you can't go to Denmark. But no, I think fundamentally that is the wrong priority. If you say that we're not taking the people who have applied properly, we're not taking the people who have been judged to be refugees by the UN, we're taking those who have already made the journey, then in practice, you are contracting out our immigration policy to the people carriers.
So what do you do with them?
Many of them are economic migrants. Many of them are identifiably from countries where there isn't a war and where they are not legally refugees. Now, don't get me wrong, I have every sympathy for them. You know, I hope that in their position I'd be doing what they did, but they do not have the legal right to do it.
What would you do with them?
With the people who are already here, you need to repatriate them to their country of origin.
What, to Syria?
No, not the Syrians, the ones who are not from Syria, who are, you know, I just came back from Italy. I
understand they're not Syrians.
Syrian
no, I understand that, but that's because,
working.
I understand that, but that's because the Syrians, for obvious geographic reasons, have chosen the Turkish route instead. So as I say again, what would you do with them?
Well, with the Syrians, we're talking about, first of all, a tiny percentage of the total, right? There are 7 million displaced in Syria, 4 million on the border, maybe 100,000 in Europe. So whatever you do with that 100,000, and okay, you can spread them out, you can let them all go to Germany, you've still got a huge number of people in far more dire need. And I think we do now need to look at establishing safe havens, both in Syria and maybe also in North Africa, places where people can, in a safe environment, make their application claim, have that process going on before they get to the EU, and then you can distinguish between those who are in need of sanctuary and those who are not.
I suppose the danger of trying to allocate the 160,000 is that the other 500,000 who would like to come over to Europe as well say, hey, this is very risky, it's dangerous, but if we get there, it's now going to be worth our while.
Sure, Andrew, you have to be honest, there is some incentivisation when people see 800,000 in Germany. We have to be honest about that. There's also saturation in the camps. That's another reason people are coming in such dramatic numbers just at the moment. And what Dan is saying can happen. We can, as a nation, take people directly from and is in trouble now. But you asked the question, what happens to people here in the European Union who are genuine refugees? They can't go back to Syria. They can't go back to Libya. So the rest of the European Union, aside from the UK, because we will opt out of this more than likely on Monday, will have to do something about that, because Sweden, as you mentioned, Germany can't keep taking those levels of numbers. I think Sweden took something like 10 or 11,000 last month. Our pattern will be to take directly from
the camps
region,
rather than the people who are there.
20,000 over 5 years.
Yes.
So even if that's our policy and we defend that policy, that's fine. But remember the proportionality there, remember what we're doing. So that's fine, that's our choice. But we will have to do something about Europe because it's a crisis. The other reason we'll have to do it is because people will keep coming to those borders.
Right.
Why? Because of the saturation of the camps. Even if we're giving that amount of aid, which is absolutely generous in our country, we are giving great amounts of aid. The fact is the UN aid is running down and the
I
camps
saw
are
that
saturated.
he was saying that they're running
and
out
you
of
saw
money.
Lebanon as well.
Let me bring UKIP in. What would you do with the 160,000 refugees or migrants, call them what you will, they're clearly people have been in some trouble. What would you do with them?
Well, the key thing is that distinction, isn't it? And the economic migrants who've come in breaking the rules cannot be seen to succeed, or there'll be new pull factors. And almost every element of the Juncker plan, from dumping the Dublin rules, about claiming in the first safe country, giving access to the labour market, absorbing 160,000, they all salved his conscience and the conscience of the left of centre parties, but they will all increase pull factors. And I'm afraid when I listen to Claude, I'm reminded of the view that the immigration debate in the Labour Party is people in big houses telling people in small houses that there's lots of room in Britain, and we have diametrically different needs as regards immigration to the rest of Europe, because we are not depopulated.
I understand. You're drawing a distinction between a refugee and an economic migrant, and that's been legally, historically, a distinction. I wonder if it's a distinction that is really either identifiable or enforceable anymore. I mean, if you take a Syrian from Aleppo, where President Assad has been dropping barrel bombs and there's been intense fighting there, the economy's been ruined, people who did not side with one or the other could be in danger. Someone fleeing from Aleppo, are they a refugee or are they an economic migrant?
Well, they have a good claim to be a refugee, don't they? They need to claim asylum and refugee status in the first safe country.
So a lot of economic migrants are also asylum seekers.
Well, as Dan said, many of these people are not coming from persecution. They're coming from poor countries, and we cannot, and I don't believe even the liberal left in this country would sustain a position where we send out a signal that anyone from a poor country can land in Europe. And, you know, Angela Merkel can say 800,000, yes, but they could be our 800,000.
What about Eritrea, which is essentially a living hell on earth? And where there is a form, almost, they call it military service, but it's a form of slavery for a part of your life if you're a young man. Surely anybody fleeing from there could claim refugee status.
Andrew, there's a lot of bad countries in the world, a lot of bad regimes. We cannot, if we're to sustain our way of life, give the young men of every horrible regime a green card or whatever you want to call it to come to Britain. We have not only an immigration problem because of population density, we have an integration problem too, in that some of our migrant communities have not yet, and I put it no higher than this, successfully and fully integrated into British values, and people, that's a legitimate...
I'll come to Dan and then...
Here also of democratic control. I think most of my constituents will accept a measure of controlled legal immigration. And I think most people, not everyone, there'll be some people watching who think it's a rubbish idea, but most would also accept that there should be a refugee component in that. But in exchange, they want to know that we are in control of who comes in and in what numbers. And of course, as long as we're in the EU, we have no such control. And that's the basic problem. And I'd say one more thing. There will be British people of Commonwealth origin watching this programme now who know how difficult it is, you know, to bring auntie over for a wedding because we've had to crack down so extremely on non-EU migration so as to free up unlimited space for people with zero connection to the UK who happen to hold EU passports. Now, as we celebrate the centenary of all the volunteers who came and helped us when we were most in need, I think that is a shoddy way to be treating the relatives of those men.
There may be an element of this, of public opinion being hostile to taking too many, or even any in some cases, because there was a sense that over the past 20 years or so, the politicians lost control of the borders and that immigration became uncontrollable, so they're reluctant now. An Australian friend of mine was saying that they've instituted much tougher controls and they don't allow the boats to land. Everyone has to go to a camp in Papua New Guinea or somewhere. But he said as a consequence of the feeling that we now control our borders again, Australia has now taken the highest per capita Syrian refugees in the world,
and
even
by the
more
way,
than
a lot
Sweden.
of those guys from Burma and Bangladesh are now coming to Europe because they can't get into Australia. A point that I haven't
That's an interesting, isn't it?
It's very interesting. Australia has just taken 5,600. Canada has just taken 10,000.
But these are continental-sized countries.
Can you hold on?
But let him finish.
Patrick, Australia,
most Australians live in the same place.
Patrick, Australia has got a smaller population than us.
Do you know what the land mass comparison is? 200 times?
Patrick, people don't live in the outback, for goodness sake. They live in the cities. Andrew, please.
We'll give you a geography lesson later.
We'll give you a geography lesson later.
I think my geography has been proven right.
You made your point. Let him finish.
I think Andrew's point is correct, which is that Australia, because of this kind of, the way that it's gone is now generous. Canada's recovered that point. Look, the point is this. You're right about population density. Nobody's arguing that. But you're wrong about people wanting open doors. Nobody does. My party doesn't either. What we want is fairness and distribution. And let me finish the point. By opting into something where we know there is a crisis that may impact on us, whether we're in the EU or not, people may come to our... Let me finish the point. We come to our shores and cause issues for our infrastructure and so on. It is better to plan and organise compassionately for a crisis that is already there in the European Union than not do that. So opting into some management of that is better.
Well, there's making a brilliant case for leaving the EU. Because we could then have a Canada or Australia type immigration.
Oh, hold on. Let Patrick
You say you don't
respond.
want an open door. We already have an open door to more than 200 neighbouring countries, more than 400 million people, with Turkey in an accession process. After what Juncker and Merkel are saying and the way they're treating this, increasingly they'll become an open door to the whole world so long as we're trapped in the EU.
We don't have an open door to refugees, and there's no point in saying that.
If they acquire passports in Germany or any other EU country, then yes, we do.
We're not
to many people's dismay,
we're not
it is British government policy not to take any of the 160,000.
That is our policy.
So why is that an open door?
So it's not an open door.
What we're talking about is Juncker and Merkel's plan. We'll see 160,000 absorbed in Europe.
That's not going to affect Britain, rightly or wrongly.
Until they get EU passports.
Because we're not in Schengen and we have an opt-out.
An EU passport will mean freedom of movement in terms to the United Kingdom. We are contracting out our immigration controls.
First, we're not in Schengen.
To Juncker.
First, we're not in Schengen. Secondly, we're opting out of the 160,000. Hold on. First, we're not in Schengen. Secondly, we're not opting into the 160,000. Thirdly, we're not opting into the 120,000. So how are these people going to be coming?
Okay, we're going to we'll have to leave it there.
Course.
I have a feeling we'll be coming back to this.
Indeed.
Particularly since the party conference scene is not far away. It's bound to be a big subject at all of them. Now, in the last few minutes, the result of a ballot to choose Labour's candidate for London Mayor in next year's election has been announced, and Sadiq Khan has won the nomination. Here's a snippet of his victory speech.
Like so many Londoners, I owe London everything. And looking to the future, our burning ambition must be to ensure that all Londoners have the same opportunities. It's this that will underpin our campaign to win back City Hall. London must once again become a city where everyone can fulfil their potential. And together, we can make this a reality. By building genuinely affordable homes Londoners need to buy and to rent. By creating more high-skilled jobs and ensuring Londoners get a decent pay for a decent day's work. By making London the best city in the world in which to start and grow a business. By being the greenest mayor we've ever had and cleaning up London's filthy air.
Well, that's Labour's new candidate for London Mayor, Sadiq Khan. If you wonder why we're talking about London Mayor in Politics Europe, that's because obviously London is by far the most important city in Europe. Let's now talk to the BBC London's political editor, Tim Donovan. Tim, give us the details of how did the vote, because Tessa Jow was also up there thinking to win. What happened?
Well, she was, I think, on balance, still the favourite, wasn't she? But things have changed so much, haven't they, over the last few weeks? And quite clearly there is a Jeremy Corbyn effect here in terms of the people that have come out and backed Sadiq Khan, the registered supporters and members. However, he did, and the figures are only just coming through, he got more votes from the existing ordinary membership as well in the first round, 37%. Against 29%. So he has been ahead at every stage when they've eliminated the candidates. There were 6 in the race, one by one, and reallocated those second preferences. And in the end, he secured 58% of the vote, and Tessa Jow 42% in second.
How do the polls tell us at the moment, though obviously there's always a health warning these days on polls, if Zach Goldsmith is the Tory candidate, how do the two of them shape up?
the limited polling that there was in the run-up to this ballot had only looked at how these Labour candidates would fare against the Conservatives, and they took Zach Goldsmith as the likely Conservative. And it has shown, or did show, or most of the polling had suggested, that Tessa Jowell, being a little bit more consensual, perhaps the idea that she might be able to reach, more parts, different parts of London, would be better placed to fend him off. But Sadiq Khan's polling improved as the campaign went on. It was certainly accepted and regarded that he had a good campaign. And I think when one looks down and drills down into these figures, though, we will see that there has been a lot of support from those registered supporters, from those affiliates, that extra boost to the membership, if you like, and it's more than doubled, nearly tripled here in London, which we're all putting down to that Jeremy Corbyn effect.
Very interesting, Tim. Thank you very much for bringing us that breaking news, and London looking beautiful in the autumn sunshine behind you there. Now, EU agricultural ministers have announced a €500 million package of aid to help struggling farmers after angry protests in Brussels earlier this week. Belgian police fired water cannon, tear gas at farmers who are protesting at the slump in prices for much of their produce. Up to 7,000 farmers blocked streets in Brussels with tractors gathered outside the EU headquarters where crisis talks were taking place. Most of the aid will be directed towards milk producers because that's been particularly hard hit. Prices falling fast after Russia banned imports of EU food products. And then the dairy market before that was deregulated earlier this year. And there had been a big demonstration of farmers in Paris the week before that too, so it's been happening in a number of places. But Claude Maurice, here's the rub. The milk market was deregulated not that long ago to create a market. Prices fell, good for consumers, not necessarily good for farmers, and now they're getting a €500 million euro subsidy. What was the point?
I know, and I mean, the subsidy is really designed to take care of a crisis, and a crisis for farmers here in the United Kingdom, and not just here in France and elsewhere. I mean, our agriculture spokesperson, Paul Brannan, has been very tough on the immediate problem for farmers, and people watching this will know about the milk issue and farmers going out of business and being bankrupt. So that immediate issue needs something like the fair trade prices. I mean, the good research shows that about a third of consumers would be willing to pay a little bit more, because the causes of the kind of problems we're seeing now are not just that EU quota issue, but you've got the collapse in China, you've got the Russia problem.
Well, you may have been right first time.
I may have been. But you've got those problems. So it's multi-problems. And then, of course, the deep-rooted farming problems. And to be fair, Liz Truss, the Tory minister the government minister was trying to look at the market situation, which Labour supports getting that sorted out. But that's a medium to long-term issue.
I understand.
But we need to get the pricing sorted out for farmers as well.
Angry farmers in France. Who would have thought it?
Yeah, right. And of course, that's still where most of the EU budget goes. And I'm always interested why good, progressive, leftist politicians like Claude, good, compassionate, decent people, are happy with a system that makes Britain pay a lot more to wealthy French farmers than to poor African farmers. CAP has been a disaster for our farmers as for our consumers. We are unusually a net food importer with an efficient agricultural sector. We are both positively and negatively penalised by the Common Agricultural Policy. We pay more into it than anyone else. We get less back from it. And we are therefore, as we subsidise our farmers' rivals across the channel, we are causing environmental damage. We're causing a lot of unnecessary poverty.
I understand that's your view, but what should be done about milk prices?
Well, there is obviously the markets are telling people to diversify, and the idea that you go and you make a demonstration and then immediately taxpayers have to give you €500 million is no wonder that you're having, imagine bringing up a family like that you say, no, okay, you're sulking, there you go. I mean, it's Brussels at its worst. The solution to everything is to spend taxpayers' money.
20 seconds for the last word on this.
I think the government's approaching it in the right way, but this is going to be a medium to long-term strategy. We need to sort out farmers here as well, because they are losing their farms. And I think fair trade pricing is an immediate solution. I think we need to be concentrating much harder on this point.
All right, I'm not quite sure what fair trade pricing is, but we'll come back to it.
Farmers, that's the answer.
they're still talking. But that's it for today. Thanks to Dan Hannan and to Claude Moraes for being with us on Politics Europe. Do join us again. Bye-bye.